Welcome to the final episode in a Legendarium series called Greeks vs. Celts. In this episode, The Sacking of Delphi, we'll be talking about the Oracle of Delphi, of course, the Greek last stand at Parnassus, the seizure of the temple and its sacking, and finally, the Celtic march north. The ancient Greeks and Celts had first contact around the year 600 BC, when classical Greek colonists founded the city of Massilia in modern-day southern France. Trade relations began between the two cultures soon after, and in years to come, Celts served as mercenaries in Greek armies, often fighting as light cavalry. Celts also served in the army of Alexander the Great, a Macedonian who extended his rule from Greece to India. However, upon Alexander's death, his empire collapsed, and Alexandrian generals called the Diadochi fought 50 years of civil wars to carve up the continental empire. The Civil War coincided with the later stages of a wave of Celtic migration in which they populated northern Italy and southern Europe. A vast group of Illyrian Celts led by a warlord named Brennus crushed a Greek army at the Second Battle of Thermopylae in 279 BC before heading into the south of Greece. Brennus's main goal was the Oracle at Delphi, the religious center of the Greek world, akin to the Vatican for Christian Europe in the year 1500. Brennus hoped to plunder the extravagant treasures held in the temple. For generations, Greek notables had gifted the temple with gold and silver to win the favor of Apollo. Kings went there to hear prophecies from the gods, given by a priestess standing on a fissure which emitted gases that likely caused hallucinations. Yet the words of this stoner were seen as the gods' will. When news reached Delphi of the coming Celtic invasion, the priests consulted the oracle for advice. Most times, the oracle spoke in riddles that could be interpreted any number of ways. This time, the oracle is said to have given a straightforward answer, "I will defend my own." Encouraged, the Delphians sent out a call for help and gathered all of the javelins, arrows, and rocks they could. When Brennus attacked Delphi, he faced a strong defense. The temple was built on the southern slope of Mount Parnassus, which gave the Celts a choice between attacking through the narrow gorges to the north or making a steep climb from the valley to the south. From their vantage point, the Greek defenders could rain javelins and arrows upon the Celtic force no matter what route they took. Indeed, the natural fortifications were so strong that Delphi never even had to build a wall. Brennus ultimately chose to go through the gorges. He had arrived with a force of 30,000 Celts and faced a force of defenders that likely only numbered in the hundreds. The Greeks, in turn, positioned themselves on the precipices above and hurled everything they could at the Celts. Brennus's men died in appalling numbers, as they could only march 2 or 3 men abreast in the narrow gorges. Each step became a struggle to avoid javelins, arrows, and giant rocks. Yet the Celts refused to retreat, being so close to their goal. Despite walking over the bodies of their comrades for hours, Brennus's men finally broke through and attacked the temple. Though the Greeks tried to make a last desperate stand, they were overwhelmed by superior numbers. For a day and a night, the survivors on Mount Parnassus could only watch as the Celts vandalized sacred altars, murdered the oracle, and plundered gold, wine, and other treasures. Brennus himself must have believed that he had won everlasting fame as the man who ransacked Delphi. However, Brennus would not have long to celebrate his victory. The sacking of the temple was a shocking sacrilege in Greek eyes, and reinforcements would soon come by the thousands. The survivors on Mount Parnassus joined up with Greeks who quickly surrounded the temple. This time, fortune favored the Greeks. Brennus had no choice but to withdraw through the gorges, where he faced attacks not only from the rear by Greeks who had come down from Mount Parnassus, but from the front, from Greeks fortifying the entrances of the gorges. The area became a death trap for the Celts, with Greeks on both sides. Brennus himself was wounded while fighting the Greeks in the rearguard, leaving the Celts leaderless. Though they escaped the gorges, the Celts only did so with terrible losses. Once they fled into open country, a series of earthquakes and thunderstorms filled the Celtic warriors with dread, as these strange events made them wonder if the gods turned on them. Indeed, the atrocities that Brennus committed during his invasion of Greece had roused all the city-states to action. Rather than confront the giant force, the Greeks followed them in small parties, tracking and killing any Celtic foraging parties trying to get food for the main army. This strategy soon took its toll. Unable to pillage Greek farms for supplies, many of the Celts escaped Greece in a state of near starvation. Wounded and slow Celts were left to die by their fleeing comrades. Of the 30,000 Celts that Brennus led into Greece, 6,000 died at Thermopylae and Delphi, while another 10,000 died on the march north. Greek spin doctors later boasted that not a single Celt survived the march, which obviously was just spin. The Celts who successfully escaped Greece headed further east into Asia Minor. There they created a Celtic kingdom called Galatia, which came from the Greek word Galatae, a term for the Celts. Despite the kingdom's inglorious beginnings, it soon formed strong trade relationships with the Greek city-states to the west, and became the easternmost outpost of Celtic culture. Survivors of the march also founded the Celtic kingdom of Thessaly, located north of Macedon. However, no Celtic communities were established within Greece or Macedonia, a tremendous victory for the classical world. Indeed, the remaining waves of Celtic migration tended to focus on Central and Western Europe rather than Southern Europe. The Macedonian kingdom, which briefly fell into anarchy after the first wave of Celtic invasion, regrouped under King Antigonus II, who re-established Macedonian power and independence. Ironically, King Antigonus II often relied on Celtic mercenaries to serve as light cavalry and infantry, as did many other Greek strongmen. The performance of the Celts in battle earned them grudging respect among the Greeks, who came to see the Celts as so-called noble savages, stoic and honorable, but simple and primitive. Celts also began to replace the Persians in Greek art as the foreign enemy battled by heroic hoplites to defend Greek civilization. And that wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you saw, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and have a great rest of the day.